Literally one of the first notes I wrote in my actual notes was, "What do I do with these bones?" Or rather, how do I interact with bones? So as much as I'm joking about bones, when I started this game, the first thing I thought was bones.
I mean, the Notion screenshot that you sent is so funny in the chat. Just a lady. Oh, she's bones.
She's bones. Ah, it's all bones. There's not a living person in this game. It's all bones. You ever?
Welcome to Wide Flank.
Hey, and welcome to a Wide Flank Game Club episode where once a month we pick a game, play through it, then talk about it. This episode is about Return of the Obra Dinn.
You bastards may take exactly what I give you!
Come on before she kicks off. Let me help you.
First, some basic admin stuff. Thanks to our Patreon subscribers, keeping us going. And everyone should come on down to the Wide Flank Discord. We talk about games, play games, whatever, all that nice stuff. Sean, why don't you tell us about the game?
I'd be happy to, Alon. Before I do, though, how's it going? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good?
How about you?
I'm great. I'm stoked. This game's got a lot going on, so let's get into it. Return of the Obra Dinn is a 2018 Whodunit detective game created by Lucas Pope. And I'm going to resist the urge to dive deep into describing how totally this game is created by Lucas Pope, which
we'll get to.
Just get through the basics. The game is set in 1807, and you play an insurance adjuster for the East India Company. And you've just been dispatched to a ghost merchant ship called the Obra Dinn, which has just reappeared with no surviving crew or passengers. Your job, which is the whole game basically, is to perform an appraisal and reconstruct the events of the voyage, determining the fates of all 60 passengers and providing a cause of death for each of those individuals. The game received huge praise on release and was nominated for and won multiple awards at the Independent Games Festival Awards, including Best Art Direction, Best Narrative, Best Game Design, and the Seamus McNally Grand Prize, which is essentially Game of the Year. To dive just a little bit deeper into the good Lucas Pope, their earlier game, Papers, Please, also won the Seamus McNally Grand Prize. And to dive deeper into Wide Flank, a few of the games we've covered have won the Seamus, including Outer Wilds and Inscription. So Obra Dinn is in good company.
Yeah, good hands, good company. You just dive sort of straight in, which is something I think we talked about on the GLHF that we did a few weeks ago. But I love that you're immediately being ferried out to this abandoned boat, and you're just in the water is splashing around, the rowboat's creaking, the old abandoned boat full of corpses and bones is creaking.
It's looming over you, like you I think the first vision you see in the game is from the rowboat view, such that like it's just a huge boat beside you.
Yeah, you don't even really know the perspective yet. I think you realize quickly that there's a first-person game, and I'm controlling this person, and I can look to my right, and there's a gigantic boat that I can climb. You climb the boat. You know, the old boat's creaking. It looks completely empty and abandoned. You eventually, from the rowboat, the rower guy who can't carry your briefcase up the thing because it's too heavy.
He refuses.
You get this, you get a book, which we'll talk about, and you get this basically magic pocket watch, stopwatch, memento mortem. And then you go back up the boat, you stumble upon a corpse. You click because the pocket watch automatically comes out, and you click because there's no buttons. All there is click or hit space.
Yeah, it's a game with like super limited input, despite like, and again, one thing at a time, because this is a game that demands one thing at a time. So it's really hard to stay focused with this game, but we're gonna do
Which
our
is funny
damnedest.
because it's a game that requires so much focus.
Immense
Also,
focus.
yeah, and also just before I continue, I wanted to say we're not gonna really try to not spoil because I think it's impossible to talk about the game without some spoilers.
The way I'm thinking about it is like we're gonna spend the first chunk of this episode kind of like talking vaguely, and then we'll hit a certain point where it's like, you know what, let's get into the spoilers.
Yeah.
We'll give everybody a beat, like, okay, we warned you.
But even like 5 minutes from now, if you've never played the game, like you probably shouldn't even listen to that. I don't think.
I think
everything I've said so far is the absolute beginning of the game, first like minute of the game, but very quickly it changes.
It's a game that is very much about learning the systems of the game, kind of like piece by piece, one thing at a time, and such that like I would agree with Alon on that point of like if you haven't played the game, it might be worth just turning off the pot. We both, how many stars do you give it, Alon?
I don't know, but it's great. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's not a star-based thing. It's just both of us recommend this game.
Yes,
I think
yes.
like it's worth considering and playing. Like it won the Seamus McNally, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
But anyway, to go back, like the whole reason that I started interjecting and talking about one thing at a time is that like the inputs in the game are super, super limited for how complex the actual game design structure is. It's like you move your body, you move the camera, you interact, and you pull up your book.
Yeah.
Those are the inputs, right?
Which I think is great in terms of balance because, like you said, the actual puzzling, logic puzzle, detective-y stuff that you're doing, it gets really complex. And we mentioned earlier, you have to focus. So, like, I think marrying that with simple mechanics and like simple, buttons is a good thing.
Sure.
Otherwise, it'd be too crazy.
It gives you just enough to think about, kind of. Because, like, again, did you have more to the intro? Continue down your intro.
Okay. So yeah, let me pick up where we left off, which is you have your magical stopwatch. You don't really know what it does yet. You climb back up on the boat. You stumble upon a corpse. The pocket watch automatically gets pulled out. You click or press enter or A or spacebar, whatever you played this on, and all of a sudden, the music comes in really hardcore right there. Just I think it's a cello shredding. And it goes to black. Well, not necessarily black. It's like a greenish, grayish, screen, and you just hear a scene with subtitles.
And may I just one little more detail? It spirals in to black or gray or green or whatever the like empty. It spirals in, which,
in like a wormhole kind of way.
Yeah, which like evokes time in some ways, and like it's like. I only bring it up with such specificity because as the game went on, I started playing like a sub game with myself of like, oh, where am I going to put the center of the circle? And like I would create these really dramatic vignettes where it's like, oh, it's ending on this person's face.
Right.
Like whether that was actually relevant to what was going on or not, it's like once the moment starts happening, you sort of have agency to like guide the art of the game.
And you can cut it off too.
Can you? What do you mean?
Like if you click again, it's like and it plays like the next two like da-dum. Instead of those, it plays like a different two notes. You cut it off and you stay in the world.
I let it play every single. I never even tried to cut it off because it always felt like such a sacred moment of like we're going in. This is where they die, and when we go in, there.
So when we go in, this is. Like you said, is sort of the whole game is all of a sudden you get this black screen, green screen, gray screen, whatever you want to call it. That's audio only with subtitles. And I mean, I think the first scene is like really iconic. It's like, you bastards may take exactly what I give you, gunshot. And then boom, you're in a frozen snapshot, like frozen in time. After the audio vignette played, and you can when I say you're there, you're in there. Like you can walk around. You see a dude holding a gun with a bullet coming out. You see another dude getting shot, like falling backwards from the, the power of the bullet.
Yeah, if there's liquid or smoke or fire, it's like stopped in motion.
Right.
Often
Bullet
enough.
is blood is frozen behind them because the bullet's already going through them.
Yeah.
There's other people on the boat like doing other stuff and reacting, and you're just like there, which is just, I mean, we mentioned it on the GLHF episode, but it's just, that was so stunning for me the first time. I was just like, holy shit, this is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an effect, like it's like a really extreme representation of a fly on the wall type of feeling. Like I wanted to make a crack about feeling like a pervert, but like it's not perverse. It's
like
not,
looking through a keyhole vibe.
Yeah, like if I could stop time, what would I do? It's the game is not occupied with anything like especially perverse.
No.
It's like it's a violent game.
Very violent.
Very violent. But the feeling is one of like looking through a keyhole or like just hanging on the wall, and like and you can get right up in the face of somebody who's dying, or like right up in the face of somebody who's like in an intense emotional experience, and you get to just be like, what's going on here? And so like there is like from the get, it's like you are separate from the action of the game in a way, and the game plays out as a game that is like persistently showing you the most. I'm just gonna get right into it. There's this mechanism in the game that is the pocket watch, the memento mori. The way that this object functions in the game is you encounter a dead body, you snap open this watch, and the game shows you a snapshot of this person's moment of death.
Moment of death, I just want to be clear, it's a moment of death, not necessarily the moment of like the fatal dying blow. Like sometimes later in the game, it's just like someone like bleeding out, like, but you don't actually know how they died. Usually you do, but not always.
Sure. You're able, and this, I listened to a conversation with Lucas Pope where he's talked about how like a lot of death is just people like bleeding out. So I sort of had to like invent more creative ways to die on top of the fact that they were bleeding out. So the whole reason we're zooming in on this though is because I wanted to talk about like how intense the emotion of the moment can be, because it is like the striking moment, and the game is like all of these different striking moments. It's like the death of all 60 of these people. Yeah. And so you're separate and distant. You're kind of a ghost who's like not interacting, but what you're interacting with is like the most intense moment in a person's not their life, but like it's that's the point I just wanted to make, is that like,
and that's because of how the pocket watch functions. It's like a time travel device essentially. Like your only way of progressing the story, progressing is maybe the wrong word, but like traveling back in time to see events, maneuvering, is through death, right? And like, and there's a quote from Lucas Pope. He said, like, people have to be dying left and right, and you need a reason for people to be dying constantly. That's sort of unusual. People don't generally die all the time. So getting that working with the story in a way that the player can understand took a long time, because he kind of made this decision that that's how the story will progress, and that's how you'll be visiting these moments in time. So yeah, it's like, it's such a violent game. There's every type of death you can imagine.
And on the one hand, you can frame it up as like, this was an intense thing that happened on this boat. And on the other hand, it's like, as I'm actually describing like 60 people died on this boat, it's like, that is a lot of deaths.
A lot of folks.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of intense moments. And as I'm talking about, I'm realizing like, the game is just like these intense moments over and over and over, and you're afforded the space to like ponder them in a way that's like less. So I guess that's a question I have for you. Like, did you feel like What are some moments in the game where you felt like intense emotion, if any?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely were. My immediate thought of how to answer that question is that I found that I took way less notes during this game than
Mhm.
any other Game Club episode in the past. And I was thinking about why. And I think the real reason is that, like, I was so there.
Mm.
I was like so present in the moment of the game. Like you said, it's all these really intense moments. I was just completely overcome with that. Like, and we haven't really talked about how some memories lead to other memory, like follow up memories. You get in these like,
Right.
you know, loops essentially of like death, 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 where you like
Mhm.
just keep going through each one. And like I took no note. I like forgot to write something down in all of those moments because I was just like, oh my God, I was just so like wrapped up in all these stories and what's happening. Oh, that guy, oh, that tattoo, like, oh, that accent, like, where's this
Mhm.
guy from? Like, who is this person? Because the whole game is trying to fill out this book, which is the only other item that you have, which
Mm.
is at the end of every scene, it essentially asks you, who is this person who died and how did they die? And you
Mm.
have to fill it out. Um, and I just got so wrapped up in like trying to pay attention to everything and track all the characters and these intense emotional moments of, tell so and so's mom that I tried to save him, or
Yeah.
like love and deception and hatred and
These
like just
little
all this
it's
crazy shit.
it's slivers of character, but like often
Yes.
enough like very intense. I feel like I'm keep battering the same idea, which is just like it's you get a snapshot of someone's life in
Yeah.
their death, or like
Yeah.
you get a snapshot of like a little bit of information, and then you're out, and like and like you have other stuff to contend with. Kind of, it's like you have
Right.
60 different people who you're trying to make sense of, and there's like greater and lesser weight that like individuals have upon the story. Like
Yeah.
as the game went on, I started to realize like most of the people that I had discovered the fates of were like in like the first 15 or so. Like it was like the
Yeah.
captain, the first mate. It was like all the
Yeah.
power players.
Heavy
And as-
hitters.
Heavy hitters of the boat scene. And as I went further down the list, it was like I had less of an understanding of who these people's identity was.
Yeah.
And to that
Yeah.
point, like you look at the map. Okay. There's so many things to describe about this game. So
I know. I have so much stuff like spring loaded right now, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm even gonna be able to say this.
where to even it's
Yeah.
so I just quickly referenced something, which is the map, which is like there's multiple maps, there's multiple databases. You've got one book, but within that book you have like a map of the boat, you have photography or an illustration of everyone that's on the boat.
Yeah.
You
have
have
a glossary. You have the whole story broken up by chapters, or like broken up by almost like disasters that happen.
Yeah.
With
What's-
how many people died in each of those chapters.
Yeah. What's the word for like a list of things that are on a boat?
I don't know.
You
You're
know-
supposed to know this. Yeah, didn't you grow up on a boat or something?
I grew up on a boat. I grew up on the sea. I'm not finding it. I just tried. Anyway, point is you get it's just all these lists and
Yeah.
information.
Table of
and-
contents.
Yeah. That too is vital.
Yeah.
And it's, oh man, okay. I'm just going to take a cleansing breath. Because I do not know where to begin with this game, because and we've already began, truly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like this game is so non-linear in how it presents information.
Yes.
Like it presents
Yes.
a lot of information up front, but also
It starts at the end. I mean, to begin with, like
we
it just, the chapter's called The End, and spoiler alarm, pew, pew. Like it starts with the captain killing someone, eventually the captain blowing his own brains out after fighting off a mutiny attempt. You're just like, what the
sure.
fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Like that's the end of the book.
It's a super dramatic, not an inciting incident. It's because it's like the final thing that happens. But within the structure of the game, it's the inciting incident of like what led to this mutiny.
Yeah.
And oh man, I kind of want to get into this, but I want to save this question for the end of the episode. The question is like, what do you think happened on the Obra Dinn?
Oh,
we'll
okay.
save that. We'll save that to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Because I've got a bunch of thoughts about that. This game is overwhelming. So to get back on track, we see that go for it. What were you gonna say?
No, you go.
To get back on track, so we see that the captain has committed suicide of some sort. There's a woman made of bones in a bed nearby. There's just bones. See,
bones everywhere.
There's bones everywhere on this boat.
Literally.
It's head to toe with bones, and the more you play the game, the more bones you find.
You're walking around looking for like
bones,
corpses, bones, or like flies around like a dead body.
Truly.
And that's when you pull out your pocket watch and you know you're gonna here we go, and then you're about to enter another memory and or chain of memories. Like it's almost like a buckle up moment because like it's about to get really gnarly and a lot of people are about to die.
The thing's about to get really intense, and it's communicated to you in a way that sort of becomes comfortable at a certain point of like, oh, if I'm pulling out my pocket watch, I'm about to get into some shit, but like at least the game is telling me, okay, you're about to get into some shit. And like, here's the comfortable, the comfortable, like, here's the transition you're used to. Like, all right, let's go. What happened this time? And it's like the game falls into this like very comfortable rhythm, kind of flowing between like looking around the boat. I mean, that's oh man.
Well, let's talk about this because I wanted to talk about this because this part of the game, which I would say starts happening maybe like a couple hours in or something like that, where like you kind of know what's going on and like you're finding lots of corpses and you know the rhythm of like, okay, I'm going to go to a memory, yada, yada, yada. This is the part where like it actually started rubbing up against me the wrong way with like the UI and stuff. Because I mentioned like we've been talking about like you go into this memory and you're free to roam around, but then it fades out and you're no longer in the memory and you're in the book. Like no matter what, like it has a hard cutoff of time. And I just kept misunderstanding that of being like, wait, why can't there's more stuff I want to look at here. Like there's more I want to like see and hang out in and more information and clues
you're talking
that I
about
want
like
to take in.
Within a given
within
like,
a memory.
Frozen memory.
Within a frozen memory when it fades out and goes to the book.
And it plays a different music cue too. Like when you're first evaluating a scene, it's like this more like active, like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
And then it fades out, and then you have like this sort of ambient track, such that like you're still in the space, but it's like you've had enough time to figure it out.
Yeah.
If you haven't, you can look around if you want.
Right. And like so I mentioned I haven't really like explained it, but sometimes there's a follow. I'm calling them memories, and then there's a follow-up memory, where basically there's another corpse that's not the one that you originally pocket watched into in the memory. And what happens is like we mentioned this on GLHF episode, but neither of us I think knew what was happening at that point. But like your hand is shaking, and if any point you click or whatever, it's basically like it goes like bong, and like a white like radar scans the boat for another corpse or something like that.
It rings out a sound and communicates visually like a single outward, just like
and
effect.
Basically like all you can do once you've triggered that is go to that corpse, pocket watch into another memory, or no, sorry, hit your pocket watch, which then you follow a white mist ghost thing to
I thought of it as a ghost.
Ghosty soul type of thing that highlights the next corpse for the follow-up memory, which then you can't even move at this point. You just have to go into. And so that's what I mean when I say is rubbing against me the wrong way. It was like at this point when you're just going corpse, memory, follow-up memory, follow-up memory, follow-up memory, I was just like, I'm just being like dragged along by the stopwatch
Sure.
on rails. And I feel like I'm missing stuff because I don't have like
Yeah.
enough time to look around. And like, I don't know what's triggering the fade out. I don't really understand what's triggering the handshaking and the ghost. Like, eventually you get the hang of it. But I feel like there was a big section in the middle there where I was like, I'm just clicking through like a movie.
Yeah.
I'm just watching a game happen. I'm not really like playing a game or
There
doing
was a
anything.
phrase that a friend of the pod said when we were talking about it. We were talking about the game outside of the podcast the other day.
Whoa.
And a friend said the game is like a book. It's like reading a book, which
Yes.
like I'm not 100% sure what they meant by that, but that phrase kept coming into my mind anytime the
Right.
ghost thing happened.
Right.
Because the ghost was literally like, okay, I'm following this thing now.
And there's
and that
nothing
felt-
you can even do other than that.
It's all you can do is just turn the page to see what happened next. And like, you can think about what you've seen or what you're seeing, but like, we're moving forward, like whether you're ready to or not.
And I guess my question for you in this moment is like, well, I'm curious if this bothered you or didn't bother you in the same way that it bothered me, but also I'm just wondering why. Like, because they could have just, you go to a memory and you're just there until you want to leave the memory or until you find the next corpse. Like, right, they didn't have to like force you to go to the follow-up memory. But do you think maybe people were getting too lost or they weren't progressing the game or bounced off it?
Well, it's like once your hand starts to shake, you're allowed to like look at things,
Which I
still,
didn't know.
right?
Like when I'm first playing it, I didn't know because my hand's shaking. I just like clicked. I'm like, oh, what's happening? And then you end the scene.
And
basically.
that triggers a thing such that like it's sort of like it takes information away from you.
Yeah, you
like,
can't see, you can't look around anymore.
Yeah, it like reduces the detail of the environment around you, and it like illuminates the body that you're supposed to go to, like through the floor, essentially, such that it's like, this is the thing to pay attention to now. And I think you are right though that is motivated by like the player reacting and clicking.
Probably, right.
And I think like I developed a workflow of my own, which was like, yeah, I know my hand's shaking, but like I'm gonna try to figure out some things here. And then
you
like
eventually get there. I just wish I knew because I went through so many by just, oh, I guess I'm supposed to click again and
time
just
to go.
Time to go.
Sure.
It's making me go. And then I would like miss everything from a scene.
Yeah. So I think like this, I'm glad you're talking about this because this sort of gets at like one of the core ideas about the game that was on my mind while I was playing, which is like, what is the relationship between linearity in the game design and open-endedness in the game design? It's like, how open is this game really? How linear, like, and I don't think there's like a simple like answer for whether it's one or the other, because I think the game at different points in time is more or less linear. And I think like, honestly, like when all was said and done, I had to surrender to the linearity of the game in a way, because I was starting to notice that it's like I enjoy the space of this boat enough that like I could just wander around and look around and just sort of sniff around for like an hour straight. Like, not that there's an hour's worth of things to find, but just that like this is a compelling and curious space, such and like the aesthetic. There were moments of quietness in this game. There would be moments where like some fucked up thing would happen. I get pulled out of the ghost realm and back into reality, and then I would just go stand on the deck and look out at the ocean and the moon and be like, oh boy, there's a lot going on this boat.
It's raining, you know, it's beautiful night sky. You're just like, damn, it's heavy.
yeah. Like the game, it affords you the space to reflect on how it presents heavy information and then also has really quiet moments to let you as a human being reflect on like what's happened. And I'm talking about all of this because like I think the game has to walk a pretty like hard tightrope of like how linear are we with players versus when do we just let the player wander around, because this isn't a game where you walk on the boat and it's just bones everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a game where you walk on the boat and you see one pile of bones. And as you progress through the game, you like accumulate more piles of bones all over the boat.
Which also is a little bit confusing at first for me. I'm just like, wait, there wasn't a corpse there. I definitely would have seen it. And then, but like,
Yeah.
it's not clear what triggered it. You know, it's like, wait, why can I see this now and couldn't see it before? Why is that door open now and wasn't open before?
I think when it's physical, like changes to like the ship itself, like that, I'm totally with you. That it's like that feels more like game designy. Like, okay, well, this door is open now, so the player will go in. Because when you see the ghosts and the piles of bones and things, I was able to log in my mind like, oh, those are scenes. Like anytime I see a body, that's just
that makes sense.
That's a vision I've already done.
It's a trigger to go to a moment or a scene. Yeah.
With the difficulty of that then being like, wait, which scene is this? And I feel like that's like, you would have to spend hours and hours and hours with this game to like truly internalize like, oh, that's so and so. Like that's that's the
I
moment
use the
where,
map a lot.
Yeah.
Like I would use the map a lot because the map is actually really good. I mean, they don't. It's funny because like I was thinking about this earlier. There's so many things in the game that are not that clear, like everything we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. But the book also just like sort of tells you everything you need to know in a weird way. Like the map never hides where you are. It shows you can mouse over any of the X's where someone died and it shows you, you know, who died. If you figured it out already, what chapter,
it wants
you can just jump there. Yeah.
It wants to fill in the shorthand of like what I was just describing, which is the like, oh, this was this scene.
Right.
And like,
exactly.
It does give you enough information to like make those connections in your mind. I think the difficult thing for me was like, which connection should I be focusing on right now?
Yeah,
or like,
that's hard. Yeah.
And to, like through the end of the game, like some of those questions never left my mind of just like, I just didn't. I want to clarify something. How many fates did you end up solving?
Okay, so neither of us 100% in the game yet, which I know people are groaning right now, but I'm actually really close. I'm at 37 fates.
Okay.
And so that sounds like I'm only just over halfway, but if you think about it as like a logic deductive puzzle, I've eliminated 37 people, so there's a lot less like jumps I have to make. I'm like, oh, you know, if this guy's wearing whatever midshipman outfit and he's the only one I haven't discovered, like that's him, so there's a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of like really tricky ones I haven't figured out yet, but I'm very close.
A deeper question, a corpse within this corpse memory, if you will. How much do you know about like boats? Like, do you have a working from
literally
knowledge?
Nothing. But
Nothing?
I Googled it.
Okay.
What I enjoy is that it's Googleable, not like the game FAQ or anything. I
what
just
do
mean
I
the
do
actual,
now?
like the actual like boating terms are all real terms, right? So I'm like, what's a helmsman? What's a purser? And then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
So that was helpful actually, looking at that kind of stuff up.
So you did reference like outside information about. So I didn't look up. I don't know anything about boats, and I didn't look up any of that. I just started.
It's also in the glossary a bit. Yeah.
It's all like as much information as in this game. Like the information is in the game and is like highly, highly organized.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
EA Sports, big.
EA Sports, ship.
Boat. It's a game that the game is highly organized and sort of demands you as a player to also be highly organized.
Yeah.
Like in your mind and in how you're like sorting through often enough like intense information that is like unknowable. I
need to dive into this more because this is like. Oh, finish your thought.
No, I was just pushing and pulling with the like. Are we going to get into? I was about to say a spoilery sort of image or thing, but what were you going to say?
Say it.
All right, we're going to call this the official spoiler.
Sure.
We've been recording for like 30 minutes.
Line's been drawn in the sand.
Line's been drawn.
Get out.
as much as this game is about knowable information, this game is also about unknowable information. Because I don't think there's a clean answer for like what are those spider beasts that like came aboard the ship. Like
Not
I
that
don't
I've
think
found.
there's not that you found. I'm sure there's all these different like symbols and objects and creatures in the game that like start to reveal themselves pretty quickly. Like pretty quick in the run of the game, you have an encounter with the Kraken, which is like, if you know anything
It's
about
the second thing, right? I think it's right after the end, which is the part we talked about earlier where the captain eventually kills himself. I think the next chapter that you find, because you find his wife, right, in the bed.
and she was killed by the Kraken. Like
she dies by like the falling rigging or whatever from the Kraken. And
totally.
Is Kraken the official word? Because in my notes I just wrote like giant squid.
I wrote giant squid. I heard someone else say Kraken before recording.
Kraken is not a real thing, right?
Kraken.
It's
I don't think
legendary
Kraken's real.
Sea monster.
Giant squid is real.
Yes. Okay, it's just it's basically like a myth.
Yeah,
but it probably originated from a sighting of an actual giant squid.
Of an actual squid, which like you ever seen a giant squid?
In person?
IRL?
Would I be having a podcast if I did?
Yeah, no, but giant squids are fucking scary.
They're insane.
Excuse my language. Point is that the game the game like deals with information that's both like very straightforward and like very not straightforward. So as much as the game like demands you to understand it, I think the game also understands like this isn't totally knowable. Like at the end of the game has this love for mystery that is like, it's not about the solution, kind of. And I think like at a certain point, anyway, what are we even talking about? Because I could keep going, but where are we at in the conversation?
Well, I was gonna kind of pivot to the murder mystery, the whodunit detective kind of like game play stuff of like, I keep mentioning like a logic puzzle, deductive puzzle, but like, I don't know, the way I kind of broke it down in my notes is like, what is a detective story? And you know, like everyone's seen, you know, TV shows, movies, read books that are like this, but I think video games, I've really only played like one or two other detective games, I would say. There was Immortality, which I absolutely love, which we did a game club about. And I was kind of thinking like the Mask Quest in Majora's most recent game club is like a little bit similar. But basically the way I broke it down is like you have to gather information from the crime scene, and that's of course what you're doing all the time in this game is going to moments, gathering information.
Yeah.
In like a detective movie type of thing, you would like be questioning people and following leads and all that stuff. You can't obviously talk to the people, but you do follow the leads and you make connections with the new evidence that you have and the old evidence that you've already internalized. And then the most important part is like you make deductions, or you have like your Eureka moments. You know, and Nolan said, how did you enjoy the deductions? Did you guess or brute force any identifications? But the reason that I wanted to focus on this is because I think the strength of this, how this game approached the detective stuff, is you have to take information from the game out of the game and think about it in your head to find the answer and then execute it back in the game.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like there's no Sherlock because you're Sherlock. You know what I mean? There's no Eureka moments that happen in the game because they have to happen in your head.
Yeah, the Eurekas are not given to you.
Yeah, like, there's no like, I can't think of a game offhand, but there's not like a, do I want to say like yes, no, or maybe multiple choice answer, and like one of those is right and the other two are wrong, and it's like, yes, you're choosing from like a drop down menu, but there's 60 different people and there's probably like 30 different ways of dying, so that's like a ton of possible, answers. You can't really just guess. There's way too many to be able to guess. And so what Obra Dinn does is like it uses accents of the people, uses uniforms, relationships, bunk numbers, tattoos, wedding rings, all of this stuff to sort of help you identify people. And that is like, you think you're figuring out how everyone died, but you realize really quickly that like most of the time you can tell how they died from the memory. But what you're actually trying to figure out is who it is and who killed who, and figuring out motivations, which might help you figure out who they are also.
Which are the relationships between the characters. And it's like denser, more complicated information, which again speaks to like, it exists in your mind. Like it's like your mind can fill in more emotional content than like maybe it's like the game leads you to these places of discovery. And I want to also add that from listening to Lucas talk about the design of the game, at the start of the game's design process, he thought the core mechanic was figuring out how people die. But he realized as he was designing it that it's like, it's pretty obvious how they died. You look at a scene of somebody getting like blasted by a gun, and it's like this person got blasted by a gun. And not to laugh about anyway, we're not laughing about death, but this is a game that is very much occupied with death, and in like something of a playful way. But also like in something of like there is like a softer, more sensitive side to it that's like that is like those interpersonal relationships and those connections. And I think like that is more like you're saying, like I think that's more at the core of the game than like solving what happened. It's like maybe more about just like, who were all these people on a boat? Like, how do people deal with extreme circumstances?
You have to take other people's perspectives into account constantly. Of like, what might have motivated this person to stab this other person?
Motivated them.
And you're like, oh, this makes sense. And like, to Nolan's, first part of Nolan's question, how did you enjoy the deductions? I absolutely loved it. I love this game. It's so good. But the second part of did you guess or brute force any IDs is like, I definitely did. I think like, so the way it works, again, we mentioned this on GLHF, but now it's more clear to me, is like the final part of what a classic detective movie would be is, right, you make accusations, you like prove the person was the killer or whatever, right? And the way that they deal with like verification in this game is if you get 3 correct of like who the person is and how they died, which is often killed by another person that you also have to ID. So it gets pretty complicated. But if you get 3 right, the game like stops and is like, yo, you got 3 right, and fills it in permanently in the book. So what I did do more than once is like, I would be looking at the list of the passengers, or the crew rather, and I would be like, these 2 are 100% right. Like, I know that this is this person, and I can clearly see that he's been like spiked by a giant spider monster. And then there's one other that I'm like, I know the killer in this scene, but I don't know who is being killed. But I think it's one of these 3 different people, based on whatever their uniform or their race or whatever. And then you can just click each person until it stops and tells you got it right, which I don't even think is like cheesing. Like, I think that that's smart deduction.
It's like, where does the magic come in? The magic comes in with like the game recognizing like, yes, that's the real that's the person. You got it. Like, is there a Sherlocky analog to going through a list of potential people until realizing like, aha, it has to be this person? Do you get what I'm asking? Kind of.
I wasn't really clicking through 60 people. It was usually like, this guy's the butcher or the cook.
Sure.
And then I'd click the butcher and it didn't trigger, and I'd click the cook and it triggered. And it's like, I'm sure there's another scene that I could have figured out that this guy's the cook or the butcher, but I was also afraid that like, I'm going to forget to put it in. Like, I have this scene from a completely different part of the book. I'm going to find out who the cook is way later down the line.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that I remember that he killed this person now. You know what I mean?
And I think that like starting to get sensitive to like, all right, a bunch more information is going to come down the pipe.
Yeah.
Like I got to figure this out now or I'm never like that started rearing its head a lot as the game went on, I think, of like, yeah, I almost know who this person is, but I can't figure it out. And I kind of got to just let it go. Like I can't figure it out. I got to keep going.
I wish this game had a little bit more functionality with the book in terms of like note taking.
Okay.
I have a notepad right next to me where I started scribbling stuff down.
Yeah.
Because I had to, I'd be like, oh, like Miss Lim is crying and, Senor Nichols shot someone and Pete's mom, like all this like key name stuff.
Anytime anyone said a name, it was like bingo.
You have to remember. You have to remember.
Those
but
are
like I just wish I could have opened instead of like brute forcing. Let's just use cook and butcher as the example.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of like brute forcing it and just guessing each one, I wish that there was a way I could like mark. Well, either the cook or the butcher killed so and so.
Sure.
And then later when I find out which one it is, I can fill it in or something like that. Because the only other way to do that is either you remember or you write it down in a notebook next to you.
You ever play Sudoku?
Dude, I have Sudoku in my notes. This is Sudoku. It totally is.
There's a mechanic in Sudoku such that you write down the potentiality.
Yes.
Like this could be a 6 or it could be a 7.
Yes. And then I have to come back to the box when I have more numbers filled out so I can figure out what it is. I have that exact thing written down.
Beautiful.
So happy you brought that up. Yeah, detective. I have a note that says Detective Sudoku.
Hell yeah. That's what, like, because it's the game is loaded up with like character and setting and all these things. But at the end of the day, it is like a very data oriented, data and information oriented game. And I think like Lucas Pope as a creator, like, is reconciling like deep, I was going to say deep data addiction, but it's not, but it's like he loves the numbers and he loves the systems. He used to do work at Naughty Dog that was like UI building tools for UI design.
Yeah.
Like, let me while I'm talking about it, let me just run through he built 4 systems at Naughty Dog, which is a more or less arbitrary connection to our new cool episode with Amy Hennig over there at Naughty Dog. Amy and Lucas were working at Naughty Dog at the same time, I believe, because they both worked on Uncharted 1. I'm vamping a little bit because I can't find my... Oh, here,
Take your time.
So he built systems for games like Uncharted and Uncharted 2. He built a GUI tool for the designers to map out all the levels. He built a system for the game's menus. He built a system for the game's save system, and he built a system for a localization tool set to manage thousands and thousands of voice and text files. So it's like he is a guy that he has access to all these like harder to quantify creative skill sets like art and music. He made all the music for this game
and the art. Yeah.
He is able to make all these like looser, like hoo type creative decisions, but also he has the background of somebody that is like highly systems oriented. And I think like this game is like an encapsulation of those two skill sets. Like
right.
This is a game. The kind of funny phrase I used before was like data addiction. And again, I'm not trying to joke about addiction, but it is like a game that is so demanding in terms of data and information, and like it's trying to afford you systems to make sense of it all. And as Alon is saying, it's like there is maybe a desire to like, there's got to be a better way for me to wrangle all this information. And it's like, maybe there is, but you're going to have to design it yourself because like there's other things going on.
Yeah. I mean, he had this long quote in the development process about sort of like mundane experiences. He said,
"Thank you.
I like trying to capture the interesting parts of a mundane experience, and that works really well when you like mundane mechanics because those two interests go together really well. It's kind of what directs me to pick an idea and then develop it and involve it into a full game. In every project I do, I approach it like an engineer, as if there's a problem that needs to be solved. If there's no problem, then I'm not interested. But if there's a problem, if there's some restriction or some limitation, then I'm interested suddenly. That's why I have one bit, which we'll talk about the graphics. That's why I have simple mechanics that you wouldn't expect to build a story out of, because solving those problems are the most interesting and fun parts of game development for me.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
That's beautiful. And I'm so glad that like he himself recognized. I mean,
Yeah.
whether I have in my notes that like this is a game that's both like occupied with like magic and the fantastic and woo,
Yeah.
woo, 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 but it's a game that's also very clearly, in terms of its aesthetics and its design, occupied with mundanity. Like
Mhm.
it is a mundane situation that becomes extreme.
And I mean, the game, his last game before this, right? Papers, Please. I played like 10 minutes of it, so I'm not about to like
Sure.
claim to be an expert of it. I just want to check it out. It seems incredible. Like I'm definitely gonna play it, but you you play like an immigration officer in this fictional dystopian sort of seems like Russia kind of place.
Sure.
And all you do all day is look at people's passports. You say papers, please, and then they slide over your passport. So like, what's a more mundane thing than being like an immigration officer? And he turned it into a really engaging, emotional game.
And that's a game that, like, as far as I know, does not contain any of the fantastical elements that we see in Obra Dinn.
Yeah, none.
Like, I don't think, like no big monsters appear at the end of Papers, Please. Like, it is mundane throughout.
You do your job.
And I'm also thinking now of, much in the same way that Alon played Papers, Please for 10 minutes, I installed Lucas's new game, Mars After Midnight.
Oh yeah, nice. On the play date.
On the play date. I meant to play it, but I didn't. But from what I can tell about that game from afar it is like you're in a fantastical place doing a mundane thing. It's like you're standing at a door choosing whether or not to let creatures in based on what, like, it's weird that they're creatures and they're funny, but like ultimately you're a doorman. Like it is this sort of like,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I wish, whatever. I'm getting in my head a little bit now.
We'll play it in the future.
But yeah, so this is a game that is like mundane, but it also comes out of Lucas's desire from that big quote that you read. Like it comes out of Lucas's design decisions come out of a need to like solve little problems, to like create little problems and then solve them. I don't even know if like the creating of them is of like major interest to him. I think it's like,
maybe not.
The scenarios like present themselves. I don't have a full understanding of his creative process.
I feel like, I don't either. The only little bit of indication I got is like the first demo of the game, I think is, a more vague version of that first scene that we talked about 40 minutes ago of like the captain killing some people.
Yeah.
But like, he was nowhere near writing the story. Like filling in the story came last,
way later.
Like he was just like, this is a cool idea to figure out like how someone died is like where he started. And that's like the problem he's trying to solve is like, like how did an event occur? I'm an insurance appraiser and I need to figure out how a person died to appropriately give them the right amount of money to their family. That's what the game is. Like that's how the game ends.
Dude, I don't want to jump to the end of the game, but just while we're talking about it, we've already taken the spoilers off. The fact that like towards the tail end of the game, you get a book that shows you like how much money a person either gets or loses based on their behavior on the boat. Like, how do we even describe this? It's like you get a ledger that's like this person behaved dishonorably. Their family will be fined $500.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Or they got killed, and so the family's rewarded money because they, whatever.
It's this like very grim capstone of just like all these like things that you've been immersed in, like all these stories that you've like used your brain power to solve are just broken down to like, oh, well, this is what happens, so this is what it costs. Like it's really harsh in a way.
That's why Sherlock is a complete psycho, because he just needs to do his thing and then like completely detach any emotional responses he had while solving the crime or whatever, because it just goes to the hands of the police or whatever.
It's not his. He relieves himself of these relationships.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something like this.
So like you're basically that. Like you have to like live 60 deaths over and over and over again, and like inspect how this guy's body is getting ripped apart by a mythical creature. And then, like, at the end of the day, that's just like a bill to his family.
It's done. You're done. It's over. Yeah. It's the only moment I think that belies like the humanity of the player character is like the moment when like your hand is shaking.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and we talked about this in GLHF already, so I won't harp on it too much, but it's like, it's interesting in a game where like there's almost no emotion on the part of the player character.
Yeah.
It's still when you're in like an intense circumstance, like your hand shakes because like your character is not like unaffected by the Kraken. The Kraken is disturbing, and like
it's
a person getting ripped in half is a lot to process, even if it is only worth like $50 or whatever, you know, like it's like, these things are detached.
I just think they like he did such a good job making the game where like from the perspective of first person, where I feel like I'm the insurance person. Like I'm internalizing all of the stuff that's happening. I'm feeling emotional for if there's an emotional moment. Like I'm feeling the Eureka. Like all of this stuff is me outside of the game.
Yeah. Yes, I'm fixating on the people that like I'm most curious about.
Exactly.
And like, why does that person keep showing up? Or like, who is that? Like there was this person with tattoos all over their body.
The circular tattoos?
Yeah. And I was so convinced that I knew who they were given some relationship with someone else. And like, but it never clicked.
Right.
We zoomed past the whole like three, you have to call out three people.
I think I mentioned that already when I was brute forcing. Yeah.
I had something I wanted to say about it, which was like, because it's a system of like, you have to choose three, or like you need to have three correct for it to ratchet at all. That is itself like a ratcheting of the game progress. Cause it's like, oh, it's so complicated.
No, take a breath and explain what you mean.
Yeah. Thank you. This game, it didn't fuck me up, but there were moments in this game where I was just like, my brain and this game don't know how compatible they are with one another. It's a game wherein, because you have to choose three accurate things for it to go through it all, it means like you're possibly throwing out guesses into the ether, and like in the back of your mind, you're starting to be like, wait, like the guesses aren't going through. So one or multiple of those are inaccurate. So which one is it? Who have I guessed? Like, I can't. There's too much I have to pay attention to over here. Like, I can't really. And so the person with the tattoos all over their body, I was like convinced of who they were. And then like as time went on and it like wasn't registering that that's who they were, that started to be like a needle in my mind of like, wait, but like, who are they then?
I know that there's a fear in any type of game that's like Sudoku even, right? Like there's that fear of like, fuck, was that number wrong? And it therefore is every number I've inputted since then wrong.
Yeah,
like there's
a concept I have in my notes of puzzle games as cascades. Like this notion of like and it's basically what you just said, which is like, how do my choices earlier in the puzzle affect my choices later in the puzzle? Right. And it's very much a Sudoku thing. It's you and I haven't talked about Picross at all, right?
Picross?
Nonograms. Does any of this ring a bell?
No.
We'll talk about it at some point.
Okay.
But it's these like Sudoku, it's a puzzle game that is like number and square based.
Yeah.
And like you end up in these situations in these types of games, in these like hard puzzle games where it's like, oh, if I make this choice, it leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this.
Yeah.
And in this game, it's like those relational choices are about character. It's like, oh, I solved who blank was, which means I know that he was shooting this person, which motivates this person to shoot this person. And like, that I think is like actually, as you were starting to say earlier in the podcast, like that might be a rare type of narrative or game design thing of like cascading relationships of characters.
Yeah.
Like it's often enough like with like numbers and squares and boxes because like,
Well, that's why I was
that's
kind of
simple.
saying there's like a little Majora's Mask quest, mass quest in there, because it's, that it's a very, very different game in basically every way. But the mass quest is a little bit of like, you're in this town that's repeating, and that's similar to a ship that's frozen in time, right? It's always the same in a way.
Totally.
And you have to understand what's happening in the town and in the world to be able to complete the mass quest. And sometimes it's relationships between a person and another person, sometimes not, but it's similar in that sense of like, you can't just like look at one memory. There's almost no times in this game where one memory solves a murder. It's always like, you might see who's dying and you might know who that is, or you might see who's killing and you might know who that is, or you might know neither. But eventually you'll piece that together with oh, that's so-and-so's brother that was mentioned in that other thing. But again, like that only exists in your brain, because if you forgot about the brother reference, you're never going to solve that. And then you have to be like, wait, who was that again? And go back to the memory and be like, if that's the brother and these people have the same last name and they're the only people the same, like there's so much of this, you just have this web in your head of like relationships between characters.
And so mechanically, are you going back into death sequences you've already seen to like
you have to
out some of
at
this?
some point you have to. I mean, I feel like I'm very close to the actual like true 100% ending, but I've already been going back into memories like nonstop. And that's basically all I'm doing now.
It's like the second half of the game.
Yeah, that's like the late game is like you have all of the memories, available to go back into, and you just know, like, I'm basically just following like threads. It's like I was like, oh wait, I don't know who killed this guy. Like, how is that possible? Like, let me bookmark his memories, go through the book to all the memories with him, and be like, oh yeah, I should know who he is. Go back to this one. I'm like, oh yeah, I know who this is, and then like it clicks. And we've been talking about the verifying when you get 3 right, but we haven't mentioned how euphoric that is. Like, it feels incredible when you lock 3 in. It's just like so nice.
It's pretty sick. Like, as much as so much of my experience with this game was like, oh, I haven't solved any fates. I don't know who killed what. Like, it's too much. As much as the game is that, like, you do, like, it only takes one breadcrumb to like sort of like wipe all those feelings away of like, just like, oh, I guess this solves this. And like, that's the point of entry and access to the game, I think, is like, because like there was a certain point midway through the game where I was like, am I going to go this entire game without solving any fates? And is that viable? Is that okay?
Right.
But once I like started to be like, hey, maybe that's okay, then my mind started to open up a little bit, and then I started to like make connections and solve things.
And like I said earlier, that Eureka moment that happens only outside the game, not in the game.
Sure. Yeah.
Incredible feeling. I mean, like I saw your face when I mentioned wedding rings. It seemed like you didn't know what I was talking about.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
You don't mind if I spoil it, I assume, right?
Truly,
like there's 3 women. Well, there's 4 women on the boat.
Yeah.
One of them is the captain's wife, who dies early. One of them is Mrs. Lim. She's got her own story. And then there's these 2 other women that you are only in, I forgot what the chapter's called, but the escape. And they're trying to like leave the boat onto a lifeboat, and there's some murdering happening there. And I noticed that one of them is wearing a wedding ring. and one of them is called Miss. What is it? I'm blanking. Miss Jane Bird or something like that, and the other one's just Emily Jackson, I think.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so Emily has the wedding ring, and Miss isn't married yet and doesn't, and that I got a verified 3 right as soon as I put
'Cause
in
you
Emily
found-
Jackson
Yeah.
killed this guy. And I
Oh,
was
because
like,
it was just
let's go. Yeah.
So
I just didn't know who killed him. Yeah.
And when you were rattling through the list of like how small some of the clues can be, you did reference one that I did clock, which was the numbered beds.
Yes.
Like, and again, this is spoiler. Who gives spoilers? Point is like some of the people's beds literally have numbers on them that correspond to their ranking within like the ship's manifest. Manifest is the word I was looking
the
for.
crew list. Yeah.
And that was one of like the simpler, just like little pieces of like, ooh, like that's just ooh. Like I'm glad this system makes sense. I'm glad they set up the boat this way.
Yeah,
like,
the first time you encounter that, I think, is with the Indians, and you can just see like this guy's in this bed, this guy's in this bed, this guy's in this bed, and you label 3. And then there's an empty bed, but there's someone in like their little quadrant of beds. There's an empty bed, and there's someone helping the sick one who's dying. And that's
So you can
like a more
infer.
simple deduction, but like it still
Yeah.
feels really good to be like, oh, he's probably the other Indian guy. And you get it, and you're like, oh, yeah, awesome. Okay, I got it.
a number.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
'cause
there's
it's-
later where the bunk bed stuff becomes like, you want me to tell you a good one that I just got like
Tell me
earlier today?
everything. Yeah.
There's a guy who commits a murder in the murder chapter who has this really distinctive tattoo of like a silhouette of a woman.
Ooh.
And in the bitter cold, which is where I'm just referencing the Indian guys are getting sick and the disease is spreading, in one of the bunks where you don't see someone's face, but there's a number, his arm is hanging out and you see the same tattoo.
Fuck off.
And you see the number and you're like, I know who you are now, you
Yeah,
motherfucker.
dude. And it
So
was
that
on
was
you
sick.
to internalize the arm tattoo.
There's
that
has to be the way to find it out. I don't know how else you could have figured it out.
So as much of the game is like systems and numbers and hard data, it's also a lot of the pieces of those puzzles are like mushier bits of data, like a tattoo on someone's arm or their accent or
the accent stuff is amazing. I mean, I'm not like, fluent enough in UK accents to be able to distinguish, maybe like a Welsh accent, but I could tell when it was like an Irish guy.
Yeah.
And then that helped me, or a Scottish guy. I was like,
Scottish was pretty clear.
Definitely Scottish. Or like, there's a guy who yells, what's his name? Alfred something. He like yells in German. He's like verdammt or something like that. And then he's like, where's my Frenchman? Like that whole scene. I was like, this is the Austrian guy because he's the only one who speaks German. And that's his Frenchman who's wearing like the French clothes. So I was like, oh, dude, it's all everything you know and have gathered in your life you can use in this game to help solve the mysteries.
Totally. Like
so beautiful.
It's information that's you keep coming back to this idea of like what is happening inside your mind outside of the game.
Exactly.
Kind of. And it's like the game is giving you these pieces of like make these connections between this wedding ring and this tattoo, but it's like I don't know if the game is especially occupied with, like I asked you the question earlier of like how much do you know about boats?
Yeah.
And apparently we're supposed to say ships. If you say boat, if you say boat in front of somebody that loves this stuff, they'll correct you and say it's ship.
Okay. Okay.
The point
if you're one of those people, maybe don't join the Discord.
The point is that the game doesn't need you to know what a Scottish accent sounds like. It doesn't need you to know what a midshipman is.
Wears or is,
But if you can start to sniff out, like specifically referencing like the midshipman, like the roles of the different people, like you are able to intuit like, oh, these people are all wearing the same outfit.
Yeah, right.
This guy's wearing a big hat. So he's probably important.
Yeah, like, exactly. And you can even fill that out in the one part of the book where I was complaining that you can't like note take. The one area you can note take is you can identify someone as unknown, but with their rank. So you can say unknown
Yeah.
officer for all the guys with the big hats, or
Yeah.
unknown passenger for just randos.
So that's like
in the bottom.
a little bit of the Sudoku.
A little bit of like I'm
sub.
remembering who that is a little, yeah.
A little, yeah, totally. So where are we at? Where are we at?
It's probably tricky from a design perspective, right? Well, I mean, he's American, but
From Virginia.
But I imagine like if you're playing this and you're from the UK, you have a little bit of an easier time with the accents, right? Like the specificity of like a Welsh accent. You're like, oh, that's this guy.
Yeah.
But so you have to
totally.
like bake in many other ways to solve everything other than just the accent, right? Like I'm sure there's like some sort of, well, especially because he's a data addict, I'm sure there's some organizational way he has of like, I need, 4 different ways to solve everyone's identity or something. And like, this one's his accent, this one tattoo, this one his brother, and this one, whatever. Because otherwise it would, I don't think there's any one you can't solve if you don't know, like you said, like don't know about ships, don't know about accents. Like, I don't think you need that.
I would have to assume it would all need to be in the game.
Yeah.
Like for the design to function at all. Because like the mind boggles at like how many stopping points there can be for a player in this game. For like a player who isn't able to intuit like what the relationships are and this, that, or the other thing. And like, I don't know if we talked about this as such on the episode yet. Maybe a little bit. Like, have we talked about yet? Like, I started to talk about like linearity versus open-endedness in the game, kind of. And I think like the game has to be okay with you seeing credits after not solving anything.
Yes,
the game has
which
to have
I didn't even realize was a thing until you mentioned it to me.
Yeah. It's because, and I'm just gonna say it, I've only solved 15 fates. Everyone's turning off the podcast. Everyone's calling me an idiot, bad gamer.
Everyone's really mad.
I'm a noob. But no, I got to a certain point in the game. I was talking through this a little bit earlier that it's like, given how my mind works, this game would have taken me like 40 hours to like actually work through. And like, it's not a question of intellect. It's just a question of like, how do our different types of minds process different types of information? What is your attention drawn to?
Yeah.
And like,
as usual, time to beat is just so wrong. Like
8 hours.
8 hours and 10 and a half to complete it. You're telling me, wait, what? No, it's going to take me like 30 and I'm almost done, but it's going to take me like 30.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. How many hours do you have logged?
I don't actually know, but I think I'm around like 15 or 16.
Oh my
and
God.
And I'm at 37 fates. So again, I think I'm close, but like there's no way I'm doing it under 20, I don't think. Like I still have all of these mysteries to solve. And then there's I know there's like more stuff in the true ending, right? So then there's another thing I have to solve in like the true ending.
I mean, that's kind of motivating to me in a way of like the fact that there is a secret chapter. That
I'm gonna do it because I really do like this game.
Yeah. Like there is a desire to like keep unfurling this game and keep playing. Like that's the thing too, is like as much as the game feels like on rails and sort of like, I'm just clicking the button to advance this book, essentially.
Yeah.
It does get to a point where it does feel far more gamely. Like it feels more, not even playful, but just like, all right, I have the pieces in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm going to move them around and see what sticks, what doesn't stick.
There's something really appealing about like, we kind of talked about this in the dev talk with David, is like, at the point I'm at in the game, I feel very safe in Lucas Pope's hands, being like, I know I have all the information here.
Yeah.
Like, I know that there's not going to be something that's unsolvable because I didn't do some stupid thing, or I didn't, like, you know, place a bomb at this wall,
I was
and
gonna
therefore I
say,
can't
yeah.
beat this level, right? It's like,
You don't have the right ring equipped.
yeah, like I didn't, whatever. That's a Zelda topic or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know that I have the whole book and all the memories, and I can access any of them. So there's something really appealing about like knowing that whatever, however deep I want to go, like I will be reciprocated with more clues.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, I always reference Castlevania when I'm talking about this, but
Yeah.
like the equivalent in Castlevania is like you have to swing your sword at every single wall in the castle, or you're gonna
Sure.
miss secrets.
There's
And you're still probably gonna miss some, but like that's how you want to do it if you want to like find all the items or whatever.
Yeah, and it's literally when I made the reference to like wearing the correct ring. I was
Yes.
thinking about there's a room in Castlevania Symphony of the Night where like you need to be wearing the right ring and make the clock go to the right time,
Yeah.
and it'll like move a stone on the left instead of a stone on the right.
Yeah.
And it's like you either happen upon that by chance or you
Which is
like,
one in a million.
yeah, it's some of these like older. Well, I think it speaks to Lucas as like a more modern game designer who like sort of recognizes. The irony is that like right now, playing games right now means we can just look up like, how do I get past this room in Castlevania?
Yeah, I can just Google like, anyone's name and return to the Obra Dinn, and it just says how their fate is just there.
Exactly. Like you have access to all that information. I think then the onus is on the designer to be like, it's kind of like what we were saying before about like we have faith in Lucas as a designer. We have trust in the reality that like everything that's in this game is in this game. Like you don't need to go on the internet to look up the name of, because at a certain point, if it's like, if you start pulling that thread, then it's like, what is the game that you're playing?
Yes.
Or like, what is your goal in playing this game? Like, is
And
it
listen,
better?
like Animal Well, I loved Animal Well. Absolutely loved it. You get the ending like 10-ish hours in, and then there's more, but it's really open-ended. And I played for a bit longer, but I didn't really like discover anything I hadn't discovered, or very little. And I just stopped, and that was the game for me. But and it was really satisfying. But some people played for 50 more hours because it's so deep.
Yeah.
And like to me, that was like a little too much. I was like, I actually do not want to do that, and that's really like unappealing and will ruin a game that I like. But like, whereas this game is like everything is laid out. You just have to figure it out with, I've given you everything.
The game feels intimate in a way of like, it's like you alone with this game. And I think like there's this concept that we're sort of breezing past in talking about like how other games are oriented, which is like, I think some of these game design decisions are made with community in mind. Like it's like
Animal Well definitely was.
Animal Well is like, can't wait for people in the comments to be like figuring this out. It's like there's like a Spelunky thing of like, I think there's like still like one thing in Spelunky that Derek is like, no one's found it yet.
Shadow of the Colossus, right? Had like a big thing with like the last Colossus or something like that. And
the community coming together to like combine information and like whatever. There's a million examples of it, and it manifested in different ways, both in terms of like designers and like game magazines and like conversations with your friends. But it's like I don't even know what name to give to that sort of design philosophy. The sort of like,
it's
you got to talk with your friends about it.
Right, because
communal knowledge.
Older games, I mean, like even the origin of the term Easter egg, right? It's like this really hidden thing that like, maybe one person will discover and then tell their friend about it, who will then, and it'll spread or something. And that's like what secrets in video games meant for a very long time. But I feel like, because I look at Obra Dinn and they're not secrets. Like, it's the game is figuring out the identity, so it's not like a secret. but like
Yeah.
they all feel like secrets. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's
It's a findable part of the game, which
Yes.
also is a secret, and it's not handed to you. Like it's not just
Mhm.
information that's presented to you, just like a secret. But it's also not this like impossible. You have to like walk backwards through the whole boat, and then this part, then the floor
Yeah.
opens, and there's a
Yeah.
kraken, and you go inside its mouth. I'm like, what? Like I would never ever find that.
It's like obscure information that never feels like I mean, it either feels like completely out of reach or it feels like just close enough that you're like trying to get at it.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
like any one piece of information in the game at any given point in the game can fit one of those two categories.
Yes.
And I think that's
I appreciate that a lot more.
I'm trying to appreciate it, but I keep coming back to the reality that it's like I don't know if my brain is able to meaningfully segment that information.
Yeah.
And like that's but again, I'm not saying like this game's so fucking stupid. Why does it do this? It's like, and I'm not beating myself down.
No.
It's not me being stupid or the game being stupid. It's like this is a game with a very, very particular manner of communicating and collecting information, communicating information, and then like how much information does it give to you at a given point in time. And I think the landing I want to stick is just like this does feel like a game that is like highly, highly focused. It's super intimate. I don't think you get a lot out of this game from like going on the web and talking through how did you solve this thing? Like it's and again, to go back to the notion of this game as book, it evokes like the intimacy to me of like curling up with a book, and it's just me and the book.
Oh my
right
god,
now.
I haven't
Just
had
me
a
and the boat.
handheld system. I've actually never owned a handheld console in my life.
Come on.
Separate topic, but I can imagine a world where like you just only play this when you like get in bed. It's like midnight and it's dark and you're just like time to play a couple hours of Obra Dinn, and it's just like, oh my god, so immersive.
I'm gonna riff a little further on that because the way that I played the game was streaming to a handheld device.
Okay.
And then this is sort of walk with me on this one, but like to double, triple down on that effect at a certain point in playing the game, I set the color palette to the black and white, so it was like far simpler.
LCD, yeah.
LCD, and there was also a setting to choose graphics that were smooth versus sharp.
Oh yeah, I didn't really know what that changed.
I chose sharp, and it renders the graphics at like a resolution it's like shrunk a little bit, like it's in like a little screen within the screen, and the graphics
windowed would be the PC term for that.
Yeah, but it still is like within the aesthetic of the game. So it's like I'm curled up on the couch with a thing that has a small thing within it that is like super, super sharp, and like because it's just black and white, it's like super low information, but also like high density of information. Like it. Point is that like the window within the window for me felt like it's like a book within a book, kind of. Like it's like I'm really just looking. I'm just looking in through this little window here. Like I'm only getting so much information. And
I mean, we should talk about how it looks, right? Because we've kind of like danced around that, but
it's such like an apparent thing, right? Like how would you describe the look of the game?
Well, what you were just talking about brings up something very specific that is like just the legibility, which was clearly a decision like in the 1-bit genre, but like he needed to make sure, right, that like you can see there's a knife there, right? Like you can see that there's a gun, and like you can see that the arm has a tattoo on it. So it's really, really legible. Obviously, it's not like super high tech graphics. What I wrote in my notes, this is grain of salt because I know nothing about art, but I was like, like a lot of AAA games are like straight like realism. They're trying to be like, this is real life basically, and this is what it would look like if you were running around on a street or in war or something. And to me, like a game like this is way more like impressionism as a response to that. Being like, you don't actually have to like show the every single pore on someone's face at, HDR 8K billion frames per second to convey that this is like a real person. Like
Yeah.
I can identify every single person on the boat, even though it's in this like 1-bit dithered pixely kind of like low res way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's how I would describe it. Is like it's a one bit monochrome sort of art style.
It's two
It's
colors.
Two colors, yeah, just two colors, which I think is what 1-bit means, right? It means like a bit is on or off. Each pixel's either on or off, basically. A 1 or a 0.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
cool.
on is like the green default color, and off is like the black or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Shane's question was, are the Obra Dinn graphics a marketing gimmick? And I'm just like, very much no for me. And he set out with a desire to specifically make a game in the style of the old Mac games that he grew up playing.
Yeah. And he says this a number of times in like a number of conversations, that's like, that was the genesis. Just, I want to make a 1-bit game.
Yeah.
And it's less like the design of those games that influences him than it is like the sheer aesthetics. Because like, as I'm playing it, and I had to tell Alon about this game too. I barely know this game. I played it when I was a child. It's called Uninvited.
Oh yeah.
And it's a game for like old Macintosh computers.
It looks so sick.
It's incredibly sick in terms of how the information is laid out. Because it is, again, it's a 1-bit game. It's like pure black and white, because this is getting outside of my wheelhouse. But I think the machines themselves might have been 1-bit, like they were literally just.
I assume so.
And I wanted to riff a little bit on how like, oh yeah, like Obra Dinn is this like more advanced, like it's like this game Uninvited is, you're presented with like individual scenes, like you're exploring a mansion, but at any given point in time, like you're just looking at a specific perspective of a room, and it's not interactive.
I'm looking at, even the screenshots are like the size of like an icon. I'm like zooming in like 800% just to like see the screenshot.
Yeah, totally. It's not that much visual information, but it's like enough visual information, and it's not that much visual information rendering like a quote real place.
Yeah, like the one I'm looking at is a teeny square, and it just says master bedroom. There's like a wheelchair, a bed, and like a wardrobe. And above it, it just says your options to click are examine, open, close, speak, operate, go, hit, or consume.
Okay. Go. Operate.
On the bottom, it says Dustin with lowercase letters. Dustin. This must be the master bedroom. Interesting decor. There's a stale smell about this room, as if it hadn't been opened for years.
Can't render that. You can't render smell in 1-bit.
Love it.
The whole reason I brought this up is because like I don't think Lucas Pope is talking about Uninvited specifically, but he is talking about like these older Macintosh games that were rendered in this way. And like the design of Invited, as I understand it, is based on like those verbs that Alon just verbalized. Like it's like an adventure game where you're like in a place and you're looking at a situation and you have to like logic out what happened in this situation.
Point and click adventure.
Point and click adventure. And as much as it like seems apparent that
Lucas Pope.
I got distracted because I was sent a message.
Oh, I sent it to you. Sorry. I just wanted to like you to save this for later, but now that I've been outed in the public, I'll just read the message I sent you, which is they made an NES version of Uninvited, known in Japan as Akuma no Shotaijo, which means the devil's invitation. They added music, and elements of the written narration and storyline were altered. It looks fucking sick. So I think we should check it out. But
There should be, yeah. We could no. It's all. I just like couldn't parse.
yeah. Close Discord for God's sake.
The Discord, the notification came up. I usually have do not disturb on. Point is yeah, we should check out Uninvited. I think like the big landing I was trying to stick is that like Luke, as much as like you can infer a design sensibility through line from Uninvited to this game, like I'm not entirely sure that's like what Lucas was thinking about when designing this game. Like it's because this is not a game that I don't think this game is about solving what happened on this boat as such. Like I feel like that's like the mechanism by which the player engages with it, like the little puzzle at the core of it, like the thing that keeps you occupied is trying to solve, like just like, oh, what were these connections, like who did what, who did this, like who did that, and like, but I think like the core this is bold for me to say, but like I think what this game is more about than the puzzles is like the people and the situation. Like I'm having a hard time putting words to this.
No, I think you're close to your thesis though, and I really want to hear it.
It's my thesis, and I'm pulling punches on this because it's like I was so occupied with the puzzles and the mechanics of the game that like I didn't really get to a point where I felt like, oh, I'm fully immersed in like the characters and I did get to a point where I felt immersed in the setting.
Right.
Like I know that I internalized. So here's the thing. Like, did I internalize character? Did I internalize setting? And from the Kraken onwards, it was so much easier to orient myself around like the broader things that were going on the boat rather than individual characters. Even with like recurrent characters like the captain. Like I never totally,
I think I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also pulling the punch because it's like, is this just a question of like, I need to play the game more? Do I need to solve more puzzles to learn more about the characters?
I would also say a little bit, but like I agree with you though, at least for the first many hours I played. I think the whirlwind story of the setting and boat is more like, internalized, like you said, than like any one individual's through line of their character. Or like their character development or their story arc or something like that. Yeah.
And I think that's like in part by design. It's like in part just like the nature of how the game is designed. Because like it's not like this is a game where you get like bio sheets up front. It's like if the game wanted you to know everything about every character, like Lucas could choose to communicate that to you. But it's like the game is occupied with communicating information to the player like super, super deliberately and gradually.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh man, I feel like I'm still in the thick of the game in a way.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like and again, I've only solved 15 fates. That's like a quarter of the identity. So I am quite literally like still in the game.
Yeah.
So all of which is to say that it's like I can't with confidence say that the game is more occupied with characters than it is its puzzles, because I think like that's the push and pull of Lucas as a designer, is like really loving like the hard puzzly numbery stuff, but then also really loving the aesthetic softer, harder to pin down stuff as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got to this idea, but
I don't know either, but I mean, one thing that definitely does happen because I'm pretty significantly further than you, I think, in the faith at least, is like there are more important and less important players that you may not be clear to you at this point that are like, oh, this is like what went down, and this is why this and this happened, and this is why that execution happened, and like stuff like that.
And I think the game even communicates that visually in a way by showing like, because like as I was getting to the end game, it was like, quote, the end game, there were still people that were blurry, because one
Yeah,
of the mechanics of the game is like when you review people's little pictures of Lord, how did this game is so difficult to describe.
I know. When you look at the drawing of the crew,
Yes.
they'll either be clear, meaning the game thinks you have enough information to maybe solve them, or they're like very blurry. And even if you try and solve them, the game is like, hold on, you don't have enough. Slow down, tough guy. You do not have enough information.
And it like has an option that's like, you can guess if you want.
I'll guess
to.
anyway, which I did.
You did?
Yeah,
Ooh,
a couple times.
You're
yeah,
bad.
A couple times.
I think this was me just leapfrogging off of what you were saying about like that there are people who are like power players in the narrative, and like those people become clear very early on in the game, and then there's characters who are like of lesser importance to the narrative that like were blurry to the very end of the game. Essentially.
Yeah.
And as like critically as I'm playing it, I keep thinking like, ooh, like when is like somebody that's been blurry all along gonna like suddenly appear clear, and it's like, wow, they're actually the most important person in the story. But it's like I never got to that point.
Yeah,
I haven't, and I'll keep playing the game.
I'm gonna keep playing, and I think we'll both get there, because I've touched on it a little bit already, and I'm like, oh, I think I know like what's happening a little bit more.
Yeah, there's and like that speaks to what the game is. So maybe like that's what the game is about. It's not about like the individual discrete puzzles. It's about like curiosity and like following curiosity and like trying to make sense of something that you like cannot make sense of.
Yeah, I think that is what it's about. I mean, this is maybe a leap too far, but you know, I was mentioning that to me the art is like impressionistic in how it relates to AAA games in terms of like, you know, its graphics being, you know, good or clear or whatever. But like that is parallel with how you get information, right? It is like impressionistic. Like you're just getting a snapshot frame of the time when they died, and you're left to fill in everything. Like everything about this game is like, I'm going to give you the very tip of the iceberg, and then your imagination and knowledge will fill out the rest of it. Right?
Yeah,
it's like, that's how the murder scenes go. That's how the story is treated. That's how the art style is. Like all of those things are the same. It's like I give you a little teeny breadcrumb, and then you can like do with it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Meaning like you can just not solve this and reach the credits and end the game if you want. Or you can dive fully in and try and solve this. And like the story, you can care about it or not care about it.
You can bookmark an individual, like you can glom onto like, who's that guy with the tattoos? And then like just choose to, I'm done trying to figure out everything else. I'm just going to figure out this one person. And that can be, and that's why I keep talking about this in terms of being like a 40-hour game, because it's possible that like lasering in on one individual could be like a 45-minute play session. And that is pleasing in a way to be able to like hyper focus.
It is. I mean, that's why at the beginning ish of me playing, I was a little bit pushing back at like, wait, just let me stay in the fucking scene.
Yeah.
Like all I want to do, I'm so in right now. Like on all of the, you know, music and atmosphere and story and characters, like at the beginning, I'm so in. I love this. It's so cool. And then it would like immediately take me out and make me follow like a ghost to another scene. I'm like, I don't even remember what happened. I didn't even identify everyone in that scene yet. You know, I'm just like, So I got really overwhelmed of just like, almost like I didn't want to start playing again at some point because I was just like, there's too much going on. And like, I don't remember all the scenes that already happened. And like, I just got to a new chapter and there's 8 more dead bodies. And I'm like,
I think this game is also very much occupied. Like it knows it's giving you a lot of information.
Yes,
and there's two behind the scenes things I want to share. One of which is that Lucas Pope talking about how the book functions in the game. He says Design-wise, the book in Obra Dinn is intended to collect and organize the deluge of information thrown at the player
There we
during
go.
gameplay. That is Lucas himself
Yes.
referring to it as a deluge of
Yes.
information
Yes.
thrown at the player. And so it's like the game knows that it's giving you like too much and then telling you, all right, move it along there,
Yeah.
buddy.
Yeah.
And the other behind the scenes thing I want to reference is that until late in the game's design, I don't know how late, because the game took like 4.5 years to make. He was making design decisions up until like 3 months before it came out.
Yeah.
He like overhauled all, like the book apparently didn't.
That was a late thing.
The
Yeah.
book was a late addition, and in an earlier iteration of the game, the way that Lucas communicated the player progress was through, how do I describe this visually? I sent a screenshot to Alon of it's an aerial shot of the map of the boat, and there's all these different arrows and twisting paths.
Oh, yeah.
And I sent this picture to Alon and jokingly, and I made a joke about it. I sent this picture to him and I said, like, what did I say? I'm scrolling up through
It's
our
simple,
Discord.
you see.
I said, it's simple, you see. And it's like the most convoluted, confusing image you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
And apparently that image was the only way that the player's progress was communicated in the game up to a certain point.
So
like,
fucking insane.
he just filled out the map of the boat with like all these interlocking lines, and you hear him talking about it on this show I was listening to, and like he himself recognizes like it was too much. Like
you got to put the show in the show notes. I'm really curious to listen.
I'll put
cool.
it's an interview with Danny O'Dwyer of No Clip. We'll link to that in the show notes. We'll also link to the picture of the boat, I think.
Yeah,
because it's like it is like this isn't even complete. Like this is just like a few different people's routines, but it is like so much visual information.
Yeah, because you can get this map in the current iteration of the game, but it's when you like bookmark one person is usually when you look at it. So it's one person's flow of time and events, and not 60.
It would just it's so the game knows that it's throwing a lot of information at you. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I don't think I was going to say anything. I was just going to also fill in Milk's other question, which was this made by one guy? Can you tell this was made by one guy? And do you wish it was made by more than one guy? Or should more games be made by just one guy?
Do you want to? I feel like I've just been talking. Do you want to answer? Because I've got an answer to that ready to go.
Don't really have an answer. I mean, I think that in the nature of how complicated it was, like what you were just talking about, and how he had to like dial that back and add a book so someone could follow along. That's a very like one person in their K-hole made this game because
it all makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what do you mean you can't figure this out? Like, so that makes a lot of sense. But
sure.
I mean, I guess maybe I haven't played enough games to be able to answer a question like this, but where my brain immediately goes is that like this game and Papers, Please, I think also falls in this, which is also Lucas Pope just solo deving.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, it's so focused.
Yes.
In a way that like GTA isn't going to be, like it's impossible for a big AAA game to ever be this focused because it's just so one idea, one aesthetic made by one person. Everything feels together in a good, satisfying way.
You were sort of outlining it in a way earlier. What were you saying about like everything in the game points to this one idea?
Oh, like the tip of the iceberg kind of way that the art is and the stories are and the murders are. And
I think that's, like that iceberg analogy is sort of like proof positive of like, what does it take for an individual to make a work of art this expansive? It's like, it starts small and then gets really big, and it's that over and over. It's like it's one person has like drawn repeated conclusions about the things that they care about, like over and over and over. And earlier I was going to reference it too, and I thought it was a little too highfalutin, but like when I was talking about the feeling of like curling up with the game like a book and like
It
the
is like a book,
intimacy
yeah.
of it, I kind of wanted to get in, like when I was saying that stuff, I almost said like, you can tell that like a single person made that, like, because as much as
one person wrote this book.
Yeah, it's like, this is me. This thing is a medium between me and the person who made it, and this is what art is.
Right. No, totally.
Gentlemen. And that like, feeling comes through super clear in this game. I think.
And I'm not gonna go as far as to say like I think more games should be made by one person. Like I don't know. I don't even know what that means.
Should.
But I love that this is like possible, and I'm really curious to play more. And I think we talked about this when we were talking about well, actually, I don't know what game it was that we were talking about this, but I think about it like a director, almost like with movies, right? I'm like, I love this director. Like, I'm in on Lucas Pope. You know, just like anything Lucas Pope makes, I'm psyched and I want to play it.
You're curious about his perspective.
Right. And like that could also work negatively, right? Like I could play a game and be like, this is really not my thing and I don't like this.
Guy.
And it looks really ugly and sounds like shit. And anytime I see that person making a game, I'm also going to be disinterested. Whereas like that's that happens for me at least to a lesser degree. Like I don't know anything about like game companies. I'm not like, oh shit, another Nintendo game. I don't care at all.
Sure.
But they're definitely less focused and less like one vision, like this game is.
Yeah, I mean oh man, to talk about how does like a huge project maintain shape? Like
so difficult.
That's a wild ass conversation that we could have. I think it's a little outside because like you very casually referenced like GTA as an example of something that will like never be as focused as this game is, and like bringing my notions of like information overload within a game that's about information. I don't even know how to put this succinctly, but like if you think about the concept of information overload in the context of like modern big budget game development, it's like it is staggering the amount of information that is on display in some of these games.
There's 1,000 plus people working on GTA.
It is impossible to process. Like, and again, I'm gonna get sucked down this whole idea because I think there's something about like the trick of those types of games is to be like completely overwhelming and completely smooth all at once. And how do different teams realize that goal? That's a whole other effing conversation. So to answer Milk's question, I think it's like quite apparent that this game is made by one person.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're at a point in game development toolkits that an individual can do this. Granted, this is Lucas, somebody who had a very like clear path, and not clear, but like a very specific path in the industry. He like started out, he made a Quake mod back in the day.
I'm so psyched he started as a modder. I mean, it's so awesome.
I'm like very excited to play his Quake mod that he made with his friends. But at the same time, I'm like, it's not like we're going to be able to parse out a through line from that Quake mod to Obra Dinn.
But the game that his game company made is like so niche. They made this one game that was actually picked up by Activision and actually made money off of it before they like disbanded. It's called Gearhead Garage.
Yeah,
game about repairing cars, very specifically not driving them.
Yeah,
he said he said at the time, Deer Hunter was a huge thing. It worked well with the Walmart distribution because people who hunt deer shop at Walmart. I grew up fixing cars with my dad in a garage, so I thought, well, I like to fix cars, and I think other people do too. That's kind of an unusual, untapped niche. Why don't we go for that? It ended up being just right for us and Activision Value, who bought the game and published it and made a lot of money. Like, I'm not going to see a through line between Gearhead Garage and Obra Dinn, but at the same time, I'm like, that's Lucas Pope, baby. I'm like,
yeah,
this dude is into weird games, and I'm so into that.
gamifying mundane situations.
Boom, there it is.
Like, yeah, it's yeah, totally. And I think it's a little hard to pull Quake up to Obra Dinn, but honestly, like drawing a through line from Gearhead to Obra Dinn, like is honestly, it's like pretty straightforward.
It's pretty much there. Yeah.
Like Lucas is in that game.
Yes.
And like,
yes.
this is, again, just like go back a little bit. This is us like wondering about the question of like, could or should more individuals make games? And I just want to like point at Lucas's career as one that like is sort of between two worlds. Like he went the route of like 90s independent game development.
Yeah.
Basically, because this Gearhead game that we're talking about is like more or less independently produced by him and his friends.
Back then, you just couldn't distribute independently. There was pre-Steam or whatever. Like, you needed CDs printed and on shelves, which is impossible. But like he was essentially indie developing back then.
So he was indie, and then he like got experience doing that, and he'll often reference quote real jobs when he's talking about his path to like Naughty Dog and things like this. Can we hear the ice cream truck?
I hear it.
Beautiful.
Okay, Lucas, drive away.
Dude, Lucas, summer's over. What was I effing getting at even?
You're saying he often references like his working in the AAA, Naughty Dog and stuff like that.
As quote real jobs.
Oh, real jobs.
He was able to. Him and his wife were able to quit their jobs and like focus on doing their independent work for like a certain amount of time. And like he's talked through like that the narrative on Papers, Please was like, what was it? It was like when Papers, Please, when he was working on that, he would show it to his wife, and his wife would say things like, that's nice, but like when this is done, you have to get a real job, kind of. and that game ended up being a huge success. All of which is a really, really long-winded way to say like, should more solo people make games? Yeah. And is it viable?
Really hard, and you have to first make a hit game called Papers, Please before you can even entertain the idea of spending 4.5 years making another game.
In order to be an independent game success, you have to in 1997 make a Quake mod with 5 of your friends. Like it's I was just going to read a quote of his from this article I read. He said, something I've always been afraid of is having people give me money for something they don't like. So I'm very timid when it comes to marketing and promotion. I'd rather you just download the game. You heard somebody liked it. You downloaded it. You tried it. You liked it yourself, as opposed to being sold on PR or some kind of presentation. He says he's the wrong person to ask about indie development because his perspective is, quote, so fucked up due to the success of Papers, Please. He's repeatedly turning down publisher deals for Obra Dinn because he doesn't want anything to intrude on his vision, his all-important restrictions. Because while he cares about you and me more than anyone, Lucas Pope makes games for himself. And this is a quote. He said, there's 2 employees at this company, me and my wife. There's not a huge network of people we need to support or expenses. I could expand and make a bigger company and make bigger games, but I would totally lose this luxury I have now. And what I really want to do is keep making games. That's the big bonus for me. I can make another game. Dude is pure. Dude is pure. He's like, it's for him, and he's somehow been able to cultivate a space where he's able to make these types of choices. That's amazing.
That's amazing. He's amazing. This game's amazing.
That does feel like, I mean, that kind of feels like a good place to land.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll be back with another Game Club and more episodes this month.
And that's how you end a podcast.
We don't know the next Game Club game, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, no, there's nothing to call out. Is there going to be a new cool next week?
I don't know. No, there's a dev talk next week.
The dev talk next week?
Yeah, that'll be the next release after this one.
Stay tuned to this RSS feed. Next week, we got a dev talk for you with...
Once Upon a Galaxy, which we in our DMs to each other called WOG. WOG. O-U-A-G.
WOG.
Because it's too long to type Once Upon a Galaxy. Never played it. Gonna play it this week.
Gonna play the hell out of it.
Phone auto battler, I think, as far as I could tell, it's a mobile auto battler.
Card game?
Yeah, but it's an
Cards?
auto battler like TFT or Hearthstone Hearthstone Battlegrounds or whatever, where like you just like lay your cards or pieces or characters on the board and then it like automatically fights someone else's. I think. I'm not actually sure, but I think it's an auto battler.
Is all of this going to be in the episode?
Delete. Anyway, bye, Sean.
Hey,
Thank you.
bye, Alon.